It's been very exciting for me to be able to participate in this discussion as part of the Scottish Handball Conference. And what's really impressed me about the approach Scottish Handball's taking is making this inclusive and having representatives from other sports such as rugby, rowing and table tennis, etc. And really showing how we're all trying to achieve the same results, which is to help build Scotland's position as a sporting nation and encouraging more to participate. So my name's Russell Dalgleish and I'll be the host for this session. So I'm now going to go round and ask each of our panellists to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Barry, then Leanne, then Alan. So if I could go over to you first, Barry, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Barry Cook. I'm in Renfrew, Scotland today. I'm a Scottish FA Category 1 referee in football, and Category 1 is the highest level of referee category in Scotland.
Thank you very much, Barry. How long have you been involved in refereeing in football?
So I've been involved for now 23 years or so as a football referee. I was a player before that, and I combined some playing and officiating back in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, but made the decision in my sort of mid-20s to really focus on refereeing, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
That's great. Thank you very much, Barry, and welcome. And now if I could move over to Leanne.
Hi, I'm Leanne Steele. I'm from Livingston Rugby Club. I'm a rugby referee. I'm level 1, which is the opposite end of the scale in rugby. So I'm at a kind of bottom rung. I went to Murrayfield and refereed women's bowl games there, but I also do loads of club games. So Sunday afternoon with the kids rugby, all the way from P1 up to under 18s and seniors. I've been refereeing probably about 10 years, and interestingly, I refereed before I played. I joined playing after I started refereeing.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm in Linlithgow, so it's delightful to know you're also in West Lothian, Leanne. And then over to Alan. Introduce yourself, Alan.
Yeah, I'm Alan. I'm in East Lothian at the moment. I am a European Handball referee, so top referee in the UK, and then qualified as a European Handball referee. I've been involved in refereeing from about 12 years. Got involved in a kind of roundabout way, was part of a Olympic programme to go towards London 2012 as a player. Wasn't going to make the full squad, and then in 2009 made the switch into refereeing and put in a fast track programme to be one of the match officials at London 2012.
It's wonderful to hear London 2012 mentioned again. I remember when we were setting up the Olympics, there was a great talk about it leaving a legacy. And I think what I've got from this conference is the number of people who were inspired by 2012. Is that what happened to you, Alan?
Yeah, partially. Initially it was as a player, and my intention was to try and make it as a player. Around 2009 it became clear that was an unlikely path to take, and then the opportunity arose to go down as the officiating pathway, and it's kind of grown from there. I've had some fantastic experiences, obviously 2012 being in there, but also on the journey before and since those games.
So thank you for that. So we all understand, in no matter what sport we're watching or participating in, that there is a need to follow a set of rules and guidelines in order for the sport to work. So, if the snooker player started picking up the ball and putting it in the pockets, it wouldn't work as a sport. Now the referee is left in the position of making sure that those rules are followed. And there's obviously, and particularly in some sports like rugby, the complexity of the rules makes it very challenging to do. But you three have all chosen to follow this career path in refereeing. And I just wondered if I could maybe understand a little bit about what you get from it and what drives you to go out there and help those games to work. And also to hear perhaps if you think that's changed over the last 10 years. So perhaps again, if I could return to you, Barry, and hear about your experience in football.
Yeah, it's football is obviously a game which everybody wants to have an opinion on, and everybody thinks that they know. And it's also a game that, like all sports, stirs up a great passion, and certainly here in Scotland, and in particular in the west of Scotland, there's a very great passion for that. And the challenge for me, I think, or what I really like about it, is just how different each situation is. The fact that, yes, like any other sport, like in handball, like in rugby, you do need to have a knowledge of the laws, but you do need to apply them, and you apply them slightly differently in each game, because you come up against different circumstances on each occasion. And so that sort of challenge, if you like, of managing the teams, managing the players, is something that does really drive you to do your best. I think also the adrenaline rush that you naturally get when you're officiating in front of a decent sized crowd. For me, I've been really lucky in my career so far to referee at some of the biggest stadiums in Scotland, and referee in front of crowds of 40 and 50,000. So really testing your ability not only to handle the situations that are going on in the game, but the situations outside, and the spectators, everything else that comes with it. And again, even as a player, although I did pretty well when I was younger in terms of the level that I played at, which was up to sort of youth international level, nothing quite compares to the level that I've got to in refereeing. So I'm definitely at a level now where I'm officiating at a higher level than I ever played at, and so that experience in itself has been great. Obviously, the scrutiny, I think, on football referees with multiple camera angles and millions of pounds, especially in England, and I suppose elsewhere in Europe, being invested in technology. We're quite late to the party when it comes to video assistant refereeing. Leanne would be able to know in rugby. They've utilised that in several other sports for quite a few years. But the sort of developments over the last 10 years through that technology, but also through the greater scrutiny, has been interesting just to see how things have moved on.
It's really interesting for me. I'll ask you each for your different sports, but in football or soccer, the introduction of technology as we watch it, particularly in the main league in England, it's quite interesting for me, because we introduced technology into sport like tennis, and it made it very straightforward. The ball's either in or out. There's no kind of disagreement about it. But in like an English Premier League, we watch it and it seems to have created even more confusion rather than made it simple. Is it just because of the way that the technology, you think, has been introduced?
No, I think the technology is absolutely fine. I think that football naturally is a game of opinions, and even as referees, although we apply a certain set of laws, situations can appear to be very, very similar, but in actual fact, when you look at the laws of the game and perhaps the way the laws are applied, they can be quite different in different circumstances. So I don't think it's about the necessarily just the introduction of the technology. I think there is just, in some cases, it's about the knowledge of the laws of the game from commentators and from players and from others who will make comments without necessarily basing it on the actual laws that are there, which is, I suppose, quite surprising. The fact that you could be a potential professional footballer or a coach for a number of years, but you don't necessarily know the parameters that you're actually playing within and how they should be interpreted. And of course, everybody, because it is about opinions, everybody sees it slightly differently, and different referees will see it like that as well. So I don't think you're ever going to get total consistency. We are aiming for consistency, but I don't think you're ever going to get total consistency just because of the number of variations in the game.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And then if I turn to Leanne and rugby, what do you get out of it, being a rugby referee? Because I must admit, I'm originally from the Scottish border, so rugby has been my life as a child, and I feel that the respect that the players give the rugby referees at international level perhaps is slightly different as you work your way down the pyramid, as they say now.
Aye. If only we were all Nigel Owens, I think that would make a big difference. The first thing to give you trouble, it's not rules, it's laws in rugby, and I think it's probably the same in the other sports as well. It's the interpretation thing that causes us a big issue, because laws are there to, as the players would say, be broken. But for me personally, the biggest thing, benefit of refereeing, is I can get right in about that action. I'm at the centre of every ruck, I'm at seeing every scrum, and from television, if you've watched rugby, there's so much happening, so many bodies in a small space. The crowd can never really pick out what's happening, but you get to see that live right in front of you. And some of the tackles that happen, I mean, I find myself refereeing, and half the things I say is like, oh, that was brilliant play, you know, stuff like that, which is kind of coaching chat. But just to be close to the action is fantastic. You know, if you can't play or whatever, if you want to continue playing, as you say, getting right in about it, you're there. But I think in a referee network sense as well, we have quite a tight group of female Scottish referees. So you've maybe seen, if you follow a bit of rugby, Holly Davidson, who used to be part of our group, went on to be the first kind of professional female rugby, and she's went to the Olympics, she does all the 7 stuff. She's fantastic. Her knowledge is second to none. But we've got quite a nice wee group of referees, and we have like calls with each other, and you're discussing rugby, and it's a sport you love. And it just gives you something else to get involved with, rather than just, you know, I mean, I do play now, although wrist issues, not at the moment, but it's something to keep you involved in a game. And as we say to our youth guys, you might not play rugby forever, you might be a social player, you might go on, you might stay at the club and just come and watch the game, but refereeing just, for me, gets me part of everything. Do you know, on a Sunday I get to see the youth play, I get to see some great moves I can take away and put in the bank, and, you know, using training in the following week. So it's just about community for me, you know, and I quite enjoy a wee debate over the application of the laws by a referee, if we've like had our senior guys or whatever. It's actually a really good chat, and refereeing is 80 minutes of pure focus. You can't really take your eye off the ball, so actually it's really quite an intense kind of thing, and it gets your mind really going as well. If you blink, as we say, there's no TMOs in the kind of local game, so you can't really take your eye off the ball, and if you do, you're having to make a decision based on 10 different factors. So it's quite an exciting and intense thing, so I love it.
Can I thank you so much for what you said there, because it had never dawned on me before that by being a referee, you're right in the middle of the action, and you can see everything that's going on and appreciate it.
I love it. That's my favourite, honestly, my favourite thing about it. Standing on the sideline, I sometimes do first aid and stuff for other teams, and you can't see. You just, what you want to see, you want to be there, and you can't be everywhere. With refereeing, it's a lot of running, but you have to be there. And I know at football, like I remember the kids' football referee used to run at the middle of the park, and I'm pretty sure Barry doesn't run at the middle of the park. But for rugby refereeing, you are at every single ruck, so you've got to be like a really high level of fitness. You've got to be there to see it. So yeah.
And in that community of referees you're part of, do you think you've seen a positive progression over the last 10 years? And, you know, are you noticing, I don't know if it's more respect or more enjoyment out of about being referees? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, rugby's quite I think if you look at Nigel Owens and he shows the red card to the big guy and he just walks off the park, that generally is what happens in rugby. There is a lot of respect for the referee. But from my perspective, refereeing, in particular teenage boys, who don't always have that respect because they've got questions. And they'll ask a question, and if they don't get the answer they like, then they can be a bit cheeky. And it is that kind of management piece around that. As Barry said, managing the game is a big aspect. And how do you speak to those players and how do you get them on board? Because if you disagree on a law, you know, you're going to apply that all throughout the game, and how do you get them on your side? So game management's huge.
I was just going to come in there on the point that Leanne made about being in the middle of the action, and that 100% struck me a few years back when I went with a few of my mates to watch Scotland playing. I think they were playing a qualifier match against the Republic of Ireland. I think it was at Celtic Park, and you know, I'm in the crowd that night, and you know, I had trudged probably out of Glasgow city centre, feel like refreshments before the game, of course, but trudged out of the city centre to Parkhead where the game has been hosted. You know, got a decent view from the stand and stuff, but as the game's going on, I'm thinking to myself, I'm normally sort of standing over there. Now, for the level that I'm officiating at, I'm normally sort of fourth official at Premier League games and things. I'm looking where the fourth official's standing, and I'm thinking, you know, I've probably paid 25 or 30 quid to be standing here to get this close, and yet actually the position I'm in as fourth official, I'm actually being paid to be as close, almost as close to the action as you can. Even as fourth official, you're almost on the field at that point in time. And like Leanne rightly says, when you're actually officiating and you're in the middle of it, and there's potentially 40 or 50,000 people who have paid to be there, and you're actually in the middle of it, getting paid to some extent, and it's not, that view of the game from being right in the middle, absolutely 100%. But and the flip side of that, I still referee schools matches. I volunteer to referee schools football matches just because I love refereeing. So although that is a massive part of what you get out of it, that involvement in the game and being close to the action, I'm 100% with you, Leanne. I get as much out of being close to the action and the under 14 school matches as I do in some of the sort of level matches.
It's the one thought that strikes me as well is that I'll watch football or rugby on the television, and the experts in the television studio are discussing some aspect of what the referee's just done, and I don't think I've ever heard the fact that, have you noticed the ball's gone from one end to the other end and the back again? So the referee's actually been sprinting the whole time. And no one ever mentioned, they're probably quite tired when they got to that point to have to make that decision that your 50 different camera angles are proving. It's quite interesting. So you all must be very fit and healthy as well.
Well, I think the thing that I was certainly told in refereeing is that very rarely would you read a newspaper report or a radio report or whatever that says the referee had a great game. I suppose if the referee doesn't get mentioned, if you don't get mentioned in dispatches, then you've probably done okay. But that you shouldn't come into refereeing looking for adulation, because it's just not there. Nobody's going to be saying, "Oh, that was a fantastic advantage that was played there in the lead up to whatever goal." But if you didn't play an advantage or you missed a foul or something in the lead up, they'll talk about that.
Yeah. But you make it happen. And if I turn to you, Alan, what about your experience being a referee and working with referees?
Yeah, it's similar to what Barry and Leanne has said. So being in the action, being at some of these high-level games, refereeing some of these high-level games that I would never have got to experience as a player, it's just fantastic. And not just from my experience, not just for the local referee community, but I've got the chance to experience a wider European referee community, going to these championships and being alongside other referees from different countries, different ways and styles of refereeing, and get to learn from them as well.
You're involved in, if I've got this right, the Scottish Handball Referee Academy, is that correct?
Yeah, so the Referee Academy is a new project that we're looking to launch around the last year, when unfortunately the pandemic came into place. So we're looking to re-pick up again. And the idea behind it, in a lot of sports, more often than not at grassroots level, you do a referee course and then you get nominated to go and do matches, and you're pretty much out there on your own, learning as you go within that. The idea behind the Referee Academy is we're going to put a lot more emphasis on the support mechanism behind it, allowing the referee mentored and to ask questions and be supported through these matches by people with the experience behind them, and pass on that knowledge to them. So
are you actively looking for people who might be interested in training as referees in handball at the moment?
Yep, if there is anyone out there who is interested, feel free to contact us via your clubs. If you're not currently part of a club, then if you get in contact with Scottish Handball through one of our social medias, or emailing the office at scottishhandball.com, and we'll point you in the right direction to get involved in that.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So I have to thank you for that, because you've all given me an insight I wouldn't have considered as to the benefits of becoming a referee. And I suppose the other one as well is it gives you longevity in the sport, because as a referee we can continue participating at the top level long after we would have been able to continue playing as participants. There was a question I wanted to ask about the different ages and Leanne, you've kind of made a point here, and it's about refereeing at different levels, because you're quite correct, these are laws and not rules. But how do you find that kind of variability with the different ages and different sort of stature of individuals who you're refereeing in their games?
Oh, do you want me to be brutally honest? The worst people to referee are other referees. And I'm one as well. So when if I play, obviously, I play scrum half, which is the nippy little position anyway for anybody that follows rugby. But I'm the person that's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And they are the worst because they think they know, but they don't see it, right? So. MD that thinks he knows the laws, they are the kind of make it harder to referee a game. What sometimes is a blessing when people don't understand all the rules and they'll ask genuine questions and you can have a dialogue about it and it's fine. And some people like that on the rugby pitch, they like a bit of dialogue through the captain or whatever. But to be honest, there are referees at all ages. Some teenage boys who've played for a while, follow rugby with their parents, teenage girls to be fair as well. There's quite a lot of them now kind of know the laws or whatever, right up until seniors that have been playing for 20, 30 years who know the laws from 20, 30 years ago and then decide that they still apply, even though we've maybe slightly changed it and gone on. So it really, I think there's challenges at every age level. My favourite are the primary 1 to 3s, what we call our micros, and they just want to get a ball in their hand and just run crazy. So that's like, we call that game coaching rather than refereeing. But no, I think it depends on the team. It depends on what their coaches told them. So coaches are a big influence on how I think teams interact with referees as well. And I think getting to know them as well is that dialogue. And we had a recent area conference about refereeing with some clubs and presidents and players and all that sort of thing, and discussed what would make a difference. And what we talked about is that dialogue when you arrive at a club. So I hope it's the same as football and handball. When a referee arrives, they'll speak to the players, they'll speak to the club members, and that kind of first introduction is actually really important to kind of say, this is the type of referee I'm going to be, this is how I'm going to speak to you, you know, and get a feel for how they're going to play and how they're going to speak to you. So I think the challenge is that making build a solid relationship before you start refereeing, because every referee is different. You've got your own style. That's the way it is. But yeah, I think it's about chatting. I don't know if Alan's that same handball wise or chat.
Maybe slightly different in the handball that we generally don't interact with the players prior to a match. We'll have conversation with the coaches and the team officials that are around the match. But in handball, because the game's so fast, there's so many opportunities within the game that we tend to set our line out at the beginning. So first 5 minutes of the game is the players and referees working each other out and what's the line that's going to be acceptable for the players to play with for that match. So maybe a similar idea, but we kind of do it within the match environment. But we do have that conversation with the coaches from arriving at the venue up until when the whistle goes to start the game.
And yes, Barry, come in.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it's been, I think I would agree with both of the guys there, that there's normally that bit of dialogue, and I suppose it starts to humanise you as a referee. I mean that in the nicest way possible, because in some quarters the referee can be viewed as a bit of a robot. You know, you're there to make decisions and you either get decisions right or decisions wrong. And you know, my approach is very much like the guys there, that, you know, I will try and talk players and coaches and things through decisions. Unfortunately, not all of them want to listen to that, and that can be quite, you know, that's where the challenge lies. And I know that some of my colleagues don't adopt that approach and you know, are very black and white. I think it's very personal to you what works, but I think having that dialogue and actually letting everybody see that you're just a normal person like they are, trying to do the best job that you possibly can, and also putting your hands up when you know you've made a mistake, because we all make mistakes. It's just that the referee's mistakes are highlighted during the game much more than some of the players. You know, as a player, I was a goalkeeper, so I suppose I was always in that position where, again, if I made a mistake, the mistake was highlighted. I always wished I was a striker that puts that put a few over the bar, and they don't talk about the few that they put over the bar as long as one goes in the net, type of thing. So it's just interesting, those different approaches. But 100% agree with the guys that, you know, that bit of interaction certainly shows that you're a human underneath it all.
That's my opening chat with them. I say I will make mistakes. Don't know how many I'm going to make, but I'll definitely make mistakes, and it's going to happen, because you can't see 30 people at all times, and I set my stall out with the guys before any game and tell them that. And they'll point them out to me, but it's fine.
Absolutely. And when you get the opinions coming back about where it's clearly wrong or whatever, it's just, well, this is what I've seen, or this is the way that I've seen it. I appreciate that you might have seen it differently. I also appreciate that I might be wrong and you might be right, but I've made the call, and I'm not going to change it because you've shouted at me, or you're telling me that it's wrong. You just need to really satisfy yourself that you've made the correct decision, and certainly with the younger referees that I've maybe been talking to in the past, that's the biggest thing that I'm sort of saying to them. You really just need to satisfy yourself, and if you can walk away and be satisfied about the decisions that you've made, then that's the first part of it for you.
I think my first kind of feedback when I started refereeing was the game safe and was the game fair? And if you can answer yes to those two questions, you've done a good job. So that's the way I go.
I'm quite intrigued because I've got a couple of questions coming in. So I had one last one to pose to you as a panel, which was about, I've always viewed, it looks lonely being the referee, because you're not, particularly in team sports, they're all a team. They've all got each other. You're on your own, or perhaps in a smaller team. And I wondered if things like, the experience during lockdown and the improvement in the use of technologies such as Zoom or Teams or anything, does that make it easier for referees to group together to support each other?
Definitely, we have. So we've had more Zoom sessions discussing referee matters than we would have done beforehand. And when we have a session at Murrayfield or somewhere, it's a lot of travel, so you get a shortened session. But Zooms, people are more relaxed, they can spend a lot more time yakking away. But yeah, I think it definitely is. Zoom has made things a lot easier.
That's good. What about yourselves, Alan or Barry?
From our point of view, we've not had much of that as of yet. It is one of the technologies that we're looking to use as part of the Referee Academy, using these new technologies to be able to reach more referees, rather than, as Leanne says, rather than having to travel out to a venue on a Wednesday night to sit through the meeting. You'll be able to do it in your home and get through a lot more. So it's one of the technologies that we are looking to adopt into utilising as part of this Referee Academy going forward.
Good.
In football, we're probably a little bit like Leanne in rugby, that we traditionally would have got together through at the Orium, done some sort of physical training as a bigger group of referees in the morning, and then sat through like a sort of seminar going through situations, clips of matches, and how whether it's right, wrong, and different, or how we would maybe approach it next time round. And I think although we've missed the sort of physical training aspect coming together, we've actually probably done more via Zoom, and that we can do little and often. It's not too much of an ask to come together for an hour every month, for example, whereas like Leanne said, giving up that full day to travel through to Edinburgh, those guys coming from north of Scotland and things like that, so leaving really early in the morning, a full day away from your family, etc. And that's the bit that maybe sometimes isn't seen, that out with the 80 minutes or the 90 minutes or whatever at the weekend, the training, the meetings, the seminars, and everything else that goes with it. It's not just that small amount of time on the weekend. There's a lot of commitment, regardless of what level you're at. But also, in addition to that, what I would say, the technology is great, but actually getting together with other people and interacting, you still can't beat that, I don't think.
Yep.
We're really lucky that our sort of weekly local training has kicked back in, and we train as a group of referees regardless of level. So we've got guys that are refereeing youth football and amateur football right through to refereeing in the professional league, and just being back and interacting with them and sharing a few stories and all the sort of camaraderie that comes with the referee community, because it is a really small community within each of the sports, but it's a really tight community because we really rely on each other. If I've had a horror show on a Saturday afternoon, there's probably somebody else who said something that's worse. And you sort of bounce off each other, and especially again for the younger referees, if they think they've had a bad game, as a more experienced ref, you can certainly tell them that, listen, that's actually nothing. Here's my worst moment almost. And it's quite cathartic sometimes, I would say, when you've got that exchange going on between referees, because like we've all admitted today, we absolutely do not get it right every time. but we need to learn, and we need to learn from each other.
So we have a question from Shane in the States, and he's talking about what can clubs do to help grow the number of referees in their regions, while also making sure we develop quality officiating. Because he's saying, in his area in the States, there's maybe only 2 or 3 referees in a region. What can we do to get more people involved and to get more people developing their qualifications?
For me, I think it's highlighting the benefits of refereeing. Most people talk about refereeing only see the negative side of it, the way that people react to refereeing decisions and the negative side of things. Whereas if you can highlight as we've all said within this, the benefits of being involved in that game, progressing your career, maybe reaching a higher level than you potentially could do as a player, and the bigger network that you can create, that almost family of referees, if you like, within that, and the benefits that come with that, I think could show
good
more people.
I think we'll have to share people extracts from this video, because you've given me incredible insight into why I would consider becoming a referee. Because Leanne, I have to tell you, I'd never thought about the fact that one of the privileges of being a referee is you're right in the middle of the action. That's a brilliant piece. And Barry, you said the same thing. What about you, Barry? What can is football awash with referees, or are you needing more people to get involved?
No, I think like most sports, we struggle on a weekly basis to cover all of the matches that need to be covered, and there are some referees who are maybe required to officiate 2 or 3 times over the course of a weekend just to make sure that games are covered. So it would be great if more people followed suit. I think there's maybe a perception. Some of the guys that are on the call will know that in my day job, I work for Sport Scotland as a partnership manager, and yesterday there was the chat around about active skills and how handball's really benefited from getting involved with the active skills programme in Scotland. And if those of you from overseas or even domestically, if you haven't watched that, get back on and catch up. There's the plug, Russell. But in that sector, I'm always thinking both professionally from a Sport Scotland point of view and in an officiating point of view about catching them early, catching them young. And I don't think the refereeing's really seen as a bit of a career path at the moment. People have a natural affinity, I think, with playing and then moving into a coaching environment. When they finish potentially their career, but there's not, I don't think at the moment, that same connection to officiating. Although for the 3 of us, there's been some sort of connection between officiating and playing, or playing then officiating. I don't think there's a natural connection there. For me, a little bit I fell into it, and Alan obviously was going for the top level, and has again been maybe diverted a little bit, and Leanne's come into playing through officiating, so it's just not automatic just now. So I would love to see in football that as part of the sort of training, if you like, that coaches and players went through a basic level referee qualification, something like that, so that they had a bit of an appreciation, and even that, for a club game on a Saturday, that some of those older players, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, would actually officiate the 9, 10, 11-year-olds or whatever. And each club almost has a group of referees that they can use. I know some other sports have tackled it like that, where at a certain age or just through the rules of the sport, they're expected to provide officials. So they train their younger players up to become officials, and it adds another skill to their gives a little bit more in their skill set, a formal qualification they can put in their CV, etc., if they're applying for college, university. So catching them young, I think, would be what I would say, and turning into a career path in addition to coaching.
That's good. And what about yourself, Leanne? Do you have plenty of referees in rugby?
No, we don't have plenty of referees, but I think I think Barry stole my thunder on the young people. What we're trying to do at Livingston anyway is get people when they're younger as another string to your bow for the game. So whether or not you want to go into referee, actually, I started off, I coached first and then I refereed because I wanted to understand the laws more rather than referee. So I wanted to understand the game. And I think for lots of, rugby can be really quite complicated unless you've played for a number of years, but I think for younger players, definitely if we could get them involved in refereeing qualifications when they're young, see, it's not as scary as you think. And and then they maybe not referee then, but as you say, they might referee some of the youth games, which would help us on like a Sunday or Saturday. But then maybe as they kind of come out the other end of their playing careers, then they can look to referee. So we're probably just a step or two behind handball at our club, is just trying to understand a bit more how we build a referee academy and give it some kudos, because actually the game doesn't happen with a referee. So if you're not any referees, the game does not go ahead. And it's a really important part to the game. And we try and sell this all the time and telling ourselves that that's why we're referees, because we need us. But we need to figure that bit out in terms of what is that ratio of referees to kind of players and squads, because we don't have lots. I must admit, I find myself running about sometimes and others do.
I wanted to ask that question because I think we have a characteristic in Scotland, which is we're incredibly good at qualifying ourselves out of opportunities. So we've kind of decided, so I speak to people all the time who go, oh, I was going to do that, but I wasn't really sure if I was good enough, or I wasn't really sure if they'd want me, or I wasn't really sure if there'd be a place. Whereas as an entrepreneur, I come from a background which is you just go in and ask. So it's quite difficult for me. So I wanted to emphasise that if anyone's watching this and they have an interest in even just finding out how the rules work, that there's places they can go to get involved, or contact yourselves to get pointed in the right direction. So that's really good, that. Now, the next question's about the rules themselves. So if the rules were laid down and never changed, that's one experience being a referee. But you're living in an environment where over time the laws of the sport change, and you're not, I would assume, part of the decision making on how the laws are going to change. You're left with implementing them, particularly when there might be an area of interpretation. And I just wondered, how do you go about doing that in your individual sports? Perhaps, Alan, if I could start with you, do you see regular changes in the laws of handball or the rules?
Not so much massive changes, but improvements in the wording and interpretation to support referees.
Uh-huh.
So I know the IHF and EHF work with a lot of the top club coaches and around the rules of the game, and then publish clarifications to support referees to make it easier to interpret what the rules mean, to create that consistency. But for me, the key thing as a referee is, one, knowing the rules of the game, but two, understanding the game. So letting the game play, enjoying being there, not being too stringent. And this is really rule B, rule C, but understand the flow. I think Barry touched on it earlier on. Yeah, each situation is different based on the game that you're within.
Okay, good. And what about yourself, Leanne? Do the rules in rugby ever change?
Yep. There's always trial laws that happen, and then they kind of cement them and they change them. So if you follow Super Rugby that happens in Australia and New Zealand, they've got some quite interesting changes. But what I would say is rugby as a whole, world rugby are trying to make the game faster and safer. Yep. So everything they've brought in the last little while is to protect head injuries, and it's also just to try and get that speedy game. So you want to get the game moving a bit faster, no stop start. So actually, I think the change in the laws recently have really benefited our game, and it doesn't necessarily make it easy to implement them, because I'll maybe read up because I'm refereeing, but the players aren't necessarily reading up on all these as well. So it's maybe just about, it's again how you handle that situation on the park at the time when something happens. But I think World Rugby are making great changes.
That's good to hear. What about, Barry, for you in football? Do you see a lot of rule changes?
Yeah, there was quite a major rewrite of the laws of the game a few years back, which did make things clearer and more concise. The laws of the game at that point in time were well over 100 pages, and I think there was something like 15,000 words, I think, were actually removed from the laws of the game, just to make it simpler and stop repeating itself in several areas. IFAB, who are the International FA Board, who look at the laws of the game, have representatives from each of the home countries, England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, plus representatives from FIFA. And they've also got a technical advisory panel. And what's probably not very well known is that, again, you mentioned earlier on about pundits and TV people and things mentioning about certain laws and things that they like or don't like. The technical advisory group involves several former top professional players and top coaches, including Arsene Wenger, who's been part of that group. So, anything that's brought forward and anything that's changed has been through quite a rigorous process involving referees, but also involving players and coaches before it gets to the stage of being published. And again, that bit's got a little bit more publicity over the last few years, but I don't think it's actually realised that that's what it goes through before it actually gets approved. And just like Leanne said, there's tournaments are used as trials and things like that before it ever gets implemented.
Because you have we're seeing sport changing, particularly around about health and safety. And, we're seeing, particularly if I look at the States, we're seeing a huge decline in interest in American football and a similar rise in soccer, which I'll probably see a change in that dynamic. But what can we as players and coaches do to help the referee? Because we never really talk about that, because there's really things that we can do to make it more straightforward. So players, I imagine, are always on that sort of grey area on just how far can they stretch that rule. But what would you like to see players and coaches and clubs doing to continue to enhance the sport by making your lives easier? Yes, Barry.
I'm happy to jump in first on this one. I think that in football, I would love to see a little bit more respect of the match officials if I could. And I think it's just remembering the fact that the coaches and players, especially at the top level, are ambassadors of the game.
Yep.
Young boys and girls are watching those games. They'll emulate the behaviour of the players and the coaches. If they see the coaches and players shouting at referees, then naturally I suppose they think that that's acceptable, and that then filters down into grassroots. And so I think that just that understanding of we're not going to get everything right, and that your reaction as a coach, your reaction as a player, especially if you're on television, etc., has that wider implication. But I think at grassroots level, it's very much about the coaches being examples and role models for young people. They are not going to agree with everything, absolutely, and we're not going to get everything right, but just to have that understanding and the sort of mutual respect between officials and coaches and players.
Good, respect. That's a great point. And Alan, what about you? What would you like to see clubs and coaches and players, that interaction with the referee?
Maybe, I think, again, Leanne touched on it earlier on, coaches just having a better understanding of the rules and be able to pass it on to players, particularly at grassroots level.
Yeah.
So if there is decisions made by referees, and taking the handball game so fast, there's not always a lot of time to make big explanations, but then coaches can then firm up the refereeing decision with the players. So the players have a better then understanding, and that way as you go through the levels, the understanding of the rules are better there, and then the respect is then improved as well. So both players, coaches and referees all kind of better understanding where the rules are, where the lines are.
Great point, and really obvious as well. And for yourself, Leanne, how would you like to see the change happen?
Oh, that's what I'm struggling with. I should have thought of this in advance. Rugby is slightly different in that there is a great deal of respect there. Yeah. And a lot of guys just take whatever you say on the chin. And it is probably about that conversation, potentially before or during the game with the captain, just to get a two-way dialogue going, because sometimes you see them taking it on the chin, but they go off in the huff or whatever. But it'd be really good for us to kind of get quicker dialogue, feedback time in terms of what they're thinking before things escalate. I don't know how you do that, to be fair, in rugby. I've not got any major issues with coaches and players, but I think the only thing I would say from a rugby perspective is and it happens most of the time, is coaches should let the players play. Sometimes you get coaches trying to get involved in a game and actually just let the guys play. You coach them during the week and a bit for the side at half time, but it's probably just letting the guys on the park play. But yeah.
I have to say, I agree. The most embarrassing thing I watch in sport is watching, multi-millionaire football coaches at English Premier League games behaving like 2-year-olds, jumping up and down, and going, what are you doing? So to leave this session, just a final question to each of you is, someone who's watching this piece and they kind of go, maybe I'd quite like to find out a little bit more about refereeing. What would you say to them if they were coming to you going, I'm interested in doing this? What would you say to someone? We'll start with you, Alan, because you've got the academy coming along and everything.
Yeah, I would say give it a go. It's much more enjoyable than you think. It's not like the pundits on a Saturday night reviewing every one of your decisions. It is enjoyable. You get good experiences, and there is that progression. There is a pathway there, like there is in playing, like there is in coaching. There is a pathway on that officiating side, which can potentially, and probably in more cases, take you further than it would be as a player. And you get chances to go and see different parts of the world in different ways. It's not just all about the playing and coaching. There is the referee aspect as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Alan. And Barry?
Yeah, I would echo many of Alan's thoughts there. I think it is about, you're not out there yourself. You absolutely are not. You might well be the single referee in the middle of that match on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, but there is a whole community there to support you. And so, you should never think of yourself as being alone out there as an official, because, we are such a tight community, and we will help you. Any referee in that community will help you anytime you need it to sort of build your initial confidence and just get yourself up and running. I think certainly in football, we would reckon if you stick with it for the first 6 to 12 months, you'll probably stick with it for life. But those experiences and the support, especially in those initial stages, if there's one bad experience in there, we've heard it a little bit too often that that can often put people off. So yeah, please don't forget that there's a network out there to support you.
Thank you, Barry. And the final words to yourself, Leanne.
Well, first of all, I'll give you my email address and you can contact me and we'll get you down the club.
Okay.
But I think we've talked about being that lone person in the middle of the field. I don't see myself as a lone person in the middle of the field. I am part of that game, right? So there's a game of rugby, which I absolutely love. I am on that field with 30 guys or 30 women or whatever age group, and we are part of that game. I make part of that game. The game doesn't happen without me. So regardless if you have a great game or we've all got our horrible experiences we've probably shared, that those games are fantastic, and you come off the park and you might be invisible a bit because you've had a great game and nobody really matters because you've done your job, but you're part of it, something really special, because and usually the same in your sports. That sport to me is amazing and I love it, and just to be on the park, part of that game, there's nothing else like it.
Thank you. Well, I on behalf of everyone who's watched this, can I thank you, Barry, Leanne and Alan. You've given us an incredible insight into something that we've just not really thought about before. And, this idea about being in the middle of it all and being part of a team, that's great to hear. So thank you all very much now. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.